Hi there, welcome.
Hey everybody.
I'm Larry.
I'm Emily.
And this is the Planning God channel. We are starting our second annual Gospel Through the Holidays reading challenge. Last year we went through the Gospel of Luke. This year we're going through the Gospel of Matthew. So the plan is for 2022, you start the day after Thanksgiving, November 25th. You read a chapter a day, pretty much every day, Monday through Friday. And then you'll get to the end of Matthew by December 31st?
Yep, before the new year.
Before the new year. So the Gospel of Matthew before the new year. So we hope that you join us for it. Today we're going to go through the introduction, or what we call the W's of Matthew. So the
who, what, where, when, why?
When, why, yeah. The W's of the book, yeah. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
So, who wrote the book of Matthew? That's the question, the first one.
That is the first one. And what I find is interesting is that the gospel accounts don't actually have the author's name in it. I think Luke is the only one that actually identifies himself as a gospel writer, whereas the other ones are all anonymous. So to get into who actually wrote this gospel and why we think it's Matthew, you got to look at internal clues within the book and external clues like church history. And both of those come together and point to Matthew as the author. So what do we know about Matthew?
Well, he was a tax collector, an apostle.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. He was a tax collector, an apostle. It's very interesting knowing those things, because in Matthew's gospel, he's the one that deals the most with money and the evils of money. As a tax collector, it's kind of a good thing that he deals with it. And then another thing is that he's from the city of Capernaum, which you'll see as you read through the book. Whenever the city of Capernaum is announced or talked about, he gives a special description of it. You know, it is a city by the sea, right? Everyone at that time would know where Capernaum is, but he had that little extra tidbit of description.
So are we going to talk about who it was written to also?
Yeah, we can talk about who it was written to.
I mean, it was written to everyone, obviously, but it was focusing on the Jews.
Yeah, I thought this is a very interesting quote about the writer of Matthew. So this is from Eusebius. He was one of the very early church fathers, and he wrote this about Matthew. He says, I'm going to quote it here: "For Matthew, who had first preached to the Hebrews, when he was about to go to other peoples, committed his gospel to writing in his native language, and thus compensated those whom he obliged to leave for the loss of his presence." So what Eusebius is kind of alluding to is that Matthew first wrote his gospel in Hebrew, his language, for the Jews, because he was leaving to go talk to Gentiles about Jesus. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that we've never found a Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew. All gospel writings that we have and have been translated from have all been in Greek. So this is really the only mention of that, but it just kind of furthers that point that Matthew's gospel is to the Hebrews. It's to the Jews. And very interesting about that is that he's going to say things, Matthew will, about the Jewish culture, and he's going to expect the reader to know what those are, what that means in the Jewish culture. And that's one thing I think I get a lot out of Matthew, is that first century Jewish context. I really enjoy that, and I'm going to bring a lot of that up as we go through our chapter summaries, I think. This is important because we're not first century Jews. So we don't
always understand
those things, right?
Yep. So, okay, so what is the book about?
Well, it's about Jesus.
Yeah, I agree. It's about Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, the Gospel of Matthew, it's talking about the life of Jesus. And
yep. Again, just to reiterate that it's about Jesus. It's about Jesus in first century Jerusalem. What is it about Jesus' life in that time frame? Because that's when he came, that's when he appeared. It was the perfect timing, right? God chose the perfect time to reveal himself through Jesus Christ. And that's very important to know that cultural context.
Or where does it take place? Where place it was written?
Yeah, the where is usually, so like other writings will have a specific location. Like, for example, Paul will do a lot of his writings from a Roman prison, right? So that's a specific location. Matthew's book, we don't actually know where he wrote it, where he sat down and penned the book. But we do know like some of the locations that are in the book of Matthew, like Capernaum, the Decapolis, right? All the cities around Galilee, Nazareth.
I always think where is a weird
It is.
question when we do the W's.
It is. It's important when you get into the letters.
No, that makes sense. But like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, well, it's a little weird.
Yeah, the letters, it becomes a little bit more important because when you have like Paul writing the book of Ephesians from a Roman prison, and he's
that makes sense.
talking about the Roman or the armor of God.
I mean, and this does make sense. It just feels weird when they're.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't really know where it was written.
Right.
But like you said, there are places within the book of Matthew where we talk about, like Capernaum or, different parts that
that Jesus traveled to.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, when was it written?
So, definitely before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D.
I got somewhere between 50 and 60 A.D.
Yep. Yeah, that's about the average is between 50 and 60. I've seen a couple of commentaries put it as early as 37 AD, but as late as 68 AD.
Well, definitely, because the destruction of the temple was 70.
70s, yeah. So it has to be at least before that.
Right.
We say that because if these accounts were written after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, they would have mentioned that because Jesus prophesies about the destruction of Jerusalem, and that would have been a fulfillment of that prophecy.
Right.
So they would have mentioned it if it was any later than 68, 69 AD.
And I think this is the last W. Why was it written?
The why. So there's a multitude of reasons why, and we'll get into a lot of that in the very first chapter. Like chapter 1, I know it's a genealogy and everybody hates genealogies, right? So-and-so begat so-and-so and so-and-so, all right? They can put you to sleep. But Jesus' genealogy from Matthew's perspective is very interesting, very fascinating. And it shows the big things about it is to show that Jesus is the promised Messiah, the King of Israel, that he will be rejected by the nation, why he's rejected by the nation of Israel, and he's going to go through God's kingdom program now that he has been rejected, right? The Messianic kingdom gets set aside. This mystery kingdom gets put in place, which is the time of the church age, and then the Messianic kingdom offer will be reintroduced at a later time in during the tribulation.
So that wraps up the W's.
That does. Do you have any other additional things that you about the book that you found interesting?
I don't think so.
No?
I'm excited to get started.
Yeah. I do want to bring up some key words in the book of Matthew because I thought that these were interesting as I did my overview studies. The word fulfilled is a very key word. Matthew very much so pulls out the Old Testament scriptures, and you'll see that, as we read through. If you have a journaling Bible, get it out and highlight. However you highlight prophecy, like in my journaling Bible, I use the color orange to highlight prophecy. Every time that it talks about Jesus fulfilling a specific prophecy, Matthew will call out that prophecy from the Old Testament and put it in. And so I've been highlighting those and marking those where they are in the Old Testament, which is really cool. So we see Jesus fulfilling prophecy. So fulfilled occurs a lot of times. The kingdom of heaven is found 32 times, talking about how Jesus is coming to bring in or usher in the kingdom of heaven. That's all before chapter 12. And then we see chapter 12 as the turning point in Matthew's gospel, and how Jesus goes from teaching the kingdom of heaven is at hand to, hey, I'm going to instruct my disciples. It's a really cool chapter. And last thing I want to point out is the divisions of the book of Matthew, how you can see it from a high level looking down. I like this.
Like an outline.
Like an outline, yeah. Thank you. An outline of the book of Matthew. I really like the outline by G. Coleman Luck in his book-by-book Bible study. He puts it like this, that chapters 1 through 4, you see the preparation of the king. Chapters 5 through 10, we see the presentation of the king. Talk about how the king is going to present himself to Israel as their Messiah. Chapters 11 through 23, the rejection of the king, what happens when he's rejected. Chapters 24 and 25 are the prophecies of the king, showing Jesus fulfilling that role as prophet. And then 26 through 28, going through the death and resurrection of the king. That's a really, I think, my favorite outline for the book of Matthew. Cool. So I think that's it. That's our overview. Look in the description below. I'll put a link to our blog page where I'm going to post my entire show notes. This wasn't the exhaustive overview. The exhaustive overview will be over on our website. You can download the Larry notes with all the references and all the research that I did. But we look forward to starting this. Remember, November 25th.
Yep.
Read Matthew chapter 1. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and here on YouTube. We're going to be posting reminders to go and read. And then later in the day, we'll post the video summary for each chapter.
Yep, we're excited to get started.
All right, so we'll catch you in the next one.